Hello. Hello and welcome to CAC's May Virtual Learning Community. Uh, Sorry, bear with us just 1 second. We're working out some of these issues, trying to get rid of the camera. Okay, hopefully you can all hear me. Please type in the box in the bottom right if you can hear me, okay? Perfect. Okay, good morning and welcome to Coaches Across Continents May Virtual Learning Community. Thanks very much for everyone for joining us today. It's great to have everyone with us from all over the world. My name is Adam Burgess. I'm the Sustainability Strategist for Coaches Across Continents. Before I introduce our very special guest today, just a couple of quick things to note. Our webinar system, EduDip, they've slightly changed the page setup. So now the buttons to make the presentation full screen, to raise your hand and other settings are in the bottom right of the room. Previously they were in the bottom left. So just make sure you note that those options are now in the bottom right of the screen. Secondly, like last month, this webinar will be much more interactive than earlier on this year. So we'll be looking for all of you to ask questions and type comments in the chat box on the right-hand side of your screen. So we'll be having some discussions later on various aspects of the presentation. So we definitely want as many comments as possible from you. Okay, so with that out of the way, it's my pleasure to introduce our special guest today, our speaker today. He's the founder and global strategist for Coaches Across Continents. And so without further ado, he'll be discussing the future of sports and social impact. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Nick Gates.
So hopefully everybody can hear me. I think, Adam, you may have the echo going at the moment. So, good morning, everyone. When Brian and Adam asked me to do this, I was in Zanzibar last week, and they suggested that this would be a great time to talk about the future of sport for social impact, particularly in light that we're working very, very hard on our 2017 strategy and the types of changes that we would like to make and the types of influences that we'd like to have in this sector. So it was a great opportunity for me to talk about some of the ideas that the Coach Across Continents team have been coming up with and some of the things that they would like to do. But at the same time, as Adam said, much more importantly, we'd like your input. And I think that's the beauty of these webinars, is whilst we can create the discussion, our method of teaching is self-directed learning. It's very much you guiding us and asking questions. So anytime during my quick 15 to 20 minute presentation this morning, please feel free to type in any questions. Adam will be looking. I can see them on the screen myself. And, we'd like to discuss the things that be most important to you. So just flicking through one more page, Adam. Perfect. I have to talk a little bit about myself. You can see me in my Middlesbrough shirts and hat. I was very, very lucky in Zanzibar that one of my amazing SDL coaches found me the stream of the Middlesbrough versus Brighton championship game, which was a game that we needed a tie to go to the Premier League. So it was a very exciting day in Zanzibar to see Middlesbrough get back into the Premier League. And you can see I wear that with pride. My father was a professional soccer player at Middlesbrough, and so it's certainly in my blood. And as you'll see, I did spend some time in the Premier League. So my background is I was lucky enough to play football for England at under 18, under 19 level, and then I chose to go to Harvard University in America. And you can see, if you can, looking at the screen, that I graduated in 1991 which makes this year my 25th reunion. And I'm actually in Boston right now, about to meet many of my classmates 25 years after graduation. I don't think I've changed a bit, but I think they may tell me that I have a lot less hair than when I graduated in 1991. I immediately set up a business called Play Soccer. This was while I was still at university, and we ran the program and we called it Sport as Education, which is pretty much today what we're talking about: sport for development, sport for social impact. So I guess in many ways I'm one of the first people that has used sport as a development tool rather than just as a way to win games and score goals. But in 2001, 2002, I traveled to about 80 countries looking at sport and how sport could impact communities. I was enticed out of my backpacking when Middlesbrough offered me a job as an executive in the Premier League. And I actually didn't enjoy the job as much as I should have done. Going back at the top level of sport and the things you have to deal with there, it wasn't as much fun as I thought it was going to be. And so I stayed for a year. Middlesbrough was successful. We had a good time. But my passion from the travel was to use sport for social impact and social development. And so I founded Coach Across Continents in 2008. And we ran our first program in Tanzania, in Kigoma, with a wonderful organization headed by Nico. And Nico is now one of our community impact coaches. I don't think I could have foreseen how Coaches Across Continents would have grown in such a short period of time. I tend to blame it all on our fantastic staff: Adam, Brian, Nora, Hooch, Marcus, Ruben, Charlie, Emily, Sophie. My mum is very much involved. But Coach Across Continents now has partnerships in 37 countries. And on International Women's Day, we had 97 countries working with us on our women's initiative. We also have about 55 countries who've applied for partnership with Coach Across Continents. And unfortunately, at the moment, we just can't fulfill the demand. But it is showing what is happening with sport for social development and social impact, that it is one of the fastest growing development tools out there. And I think that's why it's a very good time right now to chat about it and see what we have to do going forward to really make sport for social impact a central development tool, one that's respected by governments, NGOs around the world, funders, corporates, etc., when they see the advantages of what sport and development can do. So Adam, if we can switch the page, great. So very simply, what is the current state for sport for social impact? Again, I started in 1990, so I've seen incredible changes of how it's been developed, where it's been used, how it's grown. And I guess the current state right now is it's never been more popular. It's the numbers of groups who are using sport as a social impact development tool is growing. We're getting more visibility. There's more young people involved in programs around the world than ever before. And so it's absolutely a fantastic time to be involved in sport for social impact. It is becoming, I guess, a fashionable tool as well. And with that becomes dangers because fashions come in and out. So we have to be very, very careful about what we do with sport for social impact and how we move it forward. So Brian, Adam, and myself put together a couple of questions here about how you guys and how we see sport for social impact and how it's perceived, how the people who are involved in sport for social impact look at it. So we put the 4 areas: the people who do it, so that's you guys on this call, it's Coaches Across Continents. By the general public, because we often think it's interesting when we talk with people who are not involved in sport and the social development area of it, what they think about it. We're concerned and certainly interested in how the larger organizations like governments, United Nations, etc., are looking at our development area, and then by funders and potential funders. So the first question that we've got, and this is for you guys to feed in. Adam, if you just move one forward. How do we perceive sport for social impact? How are the NGOs like yourselves, what do we think about it at the moment? Is it something that's a good thing? Is it something that's popular? Is it something that we're doing well? Is it the type of thing that we have to improve upon? So how do you guys, if you want to type in some of your answers on the right-hand side, Just where are we right now? What's our feelings? Are we frustrated with it? Are we excited about it? What types of things do we think? And by the way, this is probably the most difficult one because we have to look at it from our own point of view as opposed to how we look at other people and what they're thinking about it. Yeah, Peggy, that's absolutely fantastic. I know that Nora worked very, very hard with your organization last year, and we're excited to be coming back from there. So as you guys can see on the right-hand side, we're starting to get some answers now about what's going on with it. Yeah, great in Zambia that we can see that your fantastic program there, the services are growing, the demand for the services are growing. And again, this is one of the potential problems of sport for social impact right now is how do we cope with the demand? Samantha, absolutely fantastic. I know that International Women's Day, Sarah, Nora, Judith, Sophie worked very, very hard on getting the activities out. And I know that 97 countries were part of the International Women's Day sport program. Sarah is actually just gathering information right now so we can feed back from the monitoring and evaluation side of things of the impact from there. Wonderful, wonderful. You guys are very inspirational for me reading these comments down the right-hand side. I hope you can all see it. Yeah, wonderful message there about working with children with different languages, but sport is something that can be unifying. Sorry, as I read many of these things, I can see from India some fantastic impact there on drug abuse, role models. So yeah. So I think that from our side of things, I think that from what we're all doing from the NGO side of things, I think there's some absolutely amazing NGOs out there who are using sport in the right way, and we will talk about later in this presentation. We will talk about some potential problems about sport, but I think as a group, we are doing some fantastic stuff. I can see that Brian, who's out there in the web world, is seeing those things as well from us. So for us, we're all very positive. I think that from the NGO world, we're very positive that what we're doing is making an impact, and we're doing it very, very well. And when I say we're doing it very, very well, I think you guys on the ground do it absolutely fantastically. We are able to add a little piece to it, which hopefully helps you do it the way you want it to do it. But the second part of the next part of the question is, how is sport for social impact perceived by the general public, by the people in your community, by the people in the streets? For me, I'm in America at the moment. It's an interesting challenge to talk about sport for social impact. So is there a difference between what we're doing and what people in the community think we're doing? Again, this is for you guys to write some of your answers down, perhaps some of the challenges of explaining what it is that the general public see when you tell them your story. I know it's very strange for me when I come back to America. I had a company in America. When I tell them now that we're using sport as a development tool on things like women's rights, on HIV behavior change, on child rights, on conflict prevention, there's almost a blank stare comes back to me of people saying, well, that's impossible. Sport can't do that. So how do you see it when you're talking with your community about the work that you're doing? What types of challenges perhaps do you have with people understanding the fantastic impact? Yeah, I think David has got a great point there that I think sport for social impact, and we're going to be talking about the storytelling side of things, is I think we're all struggling to explain it by telling stories, but it becomes a lot easier to answer when people see the games that you're playing on the field. That's certainly a challenge we have as we've been dealing with governments, potential funders, and certainly larger NGOs, where we've been trying to explain that sport isn't about scoring goals and winning games, as Marcus has mentioned, but much more about how the games can have a positive social impact. Yeah, great. From Samantha talking about the Ministry of Sport is now excited about learning about this as a way to address issues in the community. Wonderful from Paula saying, again, this is a huge challenge, that sport is much more than a hobby, that sport is actually, potentially for us, we think it's the greatest educational tool out there, and it's can be we call it education outside of the classroom. It's a way of engaging thousands, hundreds of millions of young people in a way, as Elvis has mentioned, that it's exciting. They want to attend the sessions. Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, Nicole, we're going to be talking about this data supporting the positive impact. That's later on in there. So fantastic recognition of one of the huge challenges we're facing now with this growing field. Anna, you know, great to talk with you, Anna, from our work in Brazil. Yeah, one of the challenges in Brazil there is that sport is seen as a way of becoming a professional footballer, professional athlete, and making lots of money, as opposed to using sport for the 99.9% of the participants who will never be a professional athlete, but love to play. Wonderful. It's interesting for me seeing the names on the side now, because I can connect. You know, Marcus has worked in Brazil. Anna is mentioning things from there. I've worked in Malawi, those sorts of areas. So, yeah, fantastic. I think we're really looking at some of the challenges there. Two more questions on this, because as we're building it through, these are how we're going to have to phrase our story to perhaps have a more positive impact. So, Adam, next one, please. So, what do we think when we're looking at the larger organizations, governments, United Nations, UNICEF, Save the Children, etc.? How are they looking at sport? What sort of recognition are they and acknowledgement are they giving sport as a development tool, as perhaps compared to some of the other areas that they're working in? This is quite a unique challenge for CAC at the moment, because we have 4 or 5 governments who have approached us about sport for social impact, and it's interesting for us about listening to them telling us what they think is happening and what we think is happening in the communities around the world. So, is there a difference between how the larger organizations, the perhaps non-sporting organizations, NGOs, governments, etc., look at sport for social impact, to how we look at sport for social impact, because we're bang in the middle and doing all the work? Yeah, it's interesting, Anna and Peggy, that we are seeing it now in these areas. The question that we would ask at the top end is, you know, that they're asking for evidence of impact, etc., which is fantastic, and I think they should. You know, is the question, are they embracing it because of the popular movement from below, from the communities, or is there a real understanding of the power of sport? Yeah, I think you're exactly right, Marcus, in the sense that governments are still seeing it as fun and recreation, and haven't recognized in the scale that we see it as, that it is the education that sport can bring. We, again, calling it education outside the classroom, could have and does have an incredible impact. Yep, Nicole, we're going to be talking a lot more about this storytelling side and gathering data. I have to tell you, by the way, everyone listening, seeing all these fantastic comments, I'm reading as fast as I can, and fascinated by it, trying to take as many notes from there. Yeah, wonderful example there that government support, if we can show things like child protection and prevention of child abuse, that's a way that governments can embrace perhaps what we're doing, and understand it in a way of not just scoring goals or scoring points in basketball, etc., etc. Samantha, it's actually going to be one of my programs in Georgia, so we're very excited about this challenge of girls playing sport, and governments, etc., creating safe spaces where girls can get involved. Yeah, and I can see the challenge that it is the parents who are often the ones who are the preventative part of it, and so the education needs to be more than just with the young leaders, but also how we educate parents and families to the positive side of sport. Yeah, I can see from Tejas in India that that schools are certainly an area that are really picking up on this, the potential positive impact for how sport can be used as an educational tool, and that comes back to you guys on the ground who are doing this fantastic work in the communities. I think your successes are really making it so that schools and governments can't ignore sport for social impact, and so huge congratulations to everybody who's doing this day to day, because you are having the change. And we will talk about this later in this conversation, about how we think it's our theory of change is very much bottom up rather than top down, that governments can put policies in place that don't seem to be trickling down to the areas that need it, but the work that you're doing is making governments recognize it and being very supportive. All right, so one more quick one as we talk about this. And this is one that always comes up into play, is how does sport for social impact, how is it perceived by funders and potential funders? So corporations, foundations, grants, individual donors. Is this another problem for us? Is this something that it's easily explained? What sort of challenges are you guys having because you're having to explain this story to potentially people who may be able to fund part of your program? I can certainly tell you that from the Coach Across Continents, our potential funding policy and how we go about it, we certainly do have to start right at the very beginning if we're talking to corporations and foundations, and explain it from, almost sport for social impact for dummies type concept of going to the starting point for it, because the understanding isn't quite there yet. But there are some positives to that as well. So how have you seen it when you've talked to potentially people who may support your organization? Has there been a challenge with what they perceive you're doing and what you're actually doing? Yeah, Brian has shown an example of funders have no problem at all in sponsoring events and spending millions on an event, but the thought of a year-round impact is a much more difficult partnership sell than it is doing a one-off flags and banners event. So that is a really important point of how we position ourselves. Yeah, certainly it's easier for a corporation or a foundation to build something or to give something away, malaria nets or a school or a library, as opposed to, using investing in education in sport and for social impact. Yeah, Anna, exactly right that we would consider an old school side that education is only in the classroom. We're strong proponents of education outside of the classroom and what can be done with that. Yeah, Nicole, some of the challenges that you have, certainly we have around the world, is taking them away from the bells and whistles, huge investment of a one-day event and press for one day, which is forgotten the next day. And so we have to be very, very clear on how we tell this story. Yeah, the social capital. And we talk a lot about cause marketing versus corporate social responsibility. How do we tell this story to corporates in a way that's yeah, Judy's highlighting this now with the social cause marketing, and they understand the difference between the funding. Yeah, it's an interesting challenge to people who've never been in the field with all of you amazing people out there. Yeah. Sorry when I laugh, I smile because we do have a collective voice here. There's so many fantastic thoughts and ideas, and one of the things we are going to talk about is this collective voice. I think one of the challenges, Nicole, that we're talking about is aligning with the goals and objectives. Is often corporates who are looking to get involved don't quite know what their goals and objectives are. So we again have to start right at the very beginning and perhaps guide them and what the potential is for using sport for social development tool and how that can impact their organization, their corporation. I certainly think one of the challenges that we're finding with the foundations is it's often hard to find our sport for social development anywhere in the categories that we use. And so that is a little bit frustrating for all of us that there's not a natural fit. We never know whether it goes under education, under health, under conflict prevention, because all of us are using it in such a unique way. Yeah, great point from Betty that sport for social impact can bring change in the communities. Great. Sorry, I'm a little bit behind on my slide. So yeah, moving on. I think there's some fantastic points there, and I hope we can continue to share these ideas. But there are different areas of where we have to tell the story. So switch one more on. Great, thanks, Adam. So this may be, and again, feel free to contradict me if you think that we're wrong at CAC in some of the things that we're saying. We absolutely value your opinions because it helps us with our monitored evaluation to do it better. But one of the things that we do think is it's at the moment, although it's rapidly growing, it's incredibly popular, it's fashionable, it's still a fringe development tool. It's not seen in the same way perhaps as education in a school or health, medicine, etc., etc. And so it's kind of looking in. It's the child in the classroom looking through the window of trying to get to the main table and the main classroom to discuss it. So this fringe development tool, we do have to work very, very hard as a collective group to move us from being slightly on the outside and people knowing that we're a strong group, but to get us right in the table. Because I think what sport can do that nothing else can do is it can do everything that everyone else is doing, but they can't do everything that we're doing. Sport can be used to address health, conflict, women's rights, child rights, perhaps much better than anything else out there. We do talk a little bit about music, perhaps about art, but sport for me, and this is why we've invested so heavily in Coach Across Continents, sport for me is the thing that has the biggest potential. So rather than being a fringe development tool, we think it should be the major development tool. Yeah, Betty's sort of reinforcing that people see it, hopefully not as a waste of time, but as a not important for social impact. Um, the second part, sorry, Adam, if you just go back one more. Our belief is that people see sport for development as running sports teams and camps, etc., not using it as a tool for changing lives, community change, and to implement government policy. And I think the blame a little bit lies on us, the people who are doing the work on the field, that perhaps we're showing the story much more through the sport side of things instead of looking at the impact part of it. So we're often showing pictures of the young people playing the sport and not as perhaps telling the story of much of them staying in school or the evidence that we've got for change in behavior, etc., etc. And this maybe, again, we'll hold ourselves accountable at CAC, that we've got to do better ourselves of explaining the story, that it's not about sports teams and sports camps, but it really is a true development tool. And with that, we've got to look at the M&E, we've got to look at our storytelling, etc., etc. Great, next one, Adam. Yeah, this is one of my frustrations, is that many grants don't consider sporting activities as a legitimate development tool. And that's a huge, huge frustration. Again, I like to think that we can control our own future, looking at the next 20 years of sport for development, that if we learn how to be one collective voice and tell the story better, the better we do it, the more grants, foundation grants, etc., will open up, wanting to work with the groups who are doing sport for social impact, as opposed to, again, being the fringe development tool. So it is frustrating when we come across things from around the world and think, well, where does we fit in telling our story on this, as opposed to just finding in the 20 categories sport for social development. It doesn't exist in the way that we want it to exist, so it does make it much more difficult for all of us to be successful. And this is one that I think we've all got to be very concerned about, that as we're developing this space, this sport for development, sport for social impact space, more and more people are coming into it. And with that, perhaps they're not as qualified as they should be. And this will be something going forward that we've got to be very, very careful that the collective voice is very, very strong, that people who are coming in for a one-hit wonder type thing don't spoil it for the rest of us who are doing it in a way that is very strategic, that we do have monitoring evaluation in place, we do have objectives, all of those things in place. So as more and more people come into the space, there is a worry that by diluting it, the story, in fact, could become more difficult to tell. So I think that's something that we've all got to be very much aware of watching what's going on in the whole market, in the global market, and making certain that we stay true to the values of what is sport for social impact, and don't the groups who are coming in, and we get applications all the time who say they're sport for social impact, but they're trying to create professional athletes, or saying they're sport for social impact, but they're just running a tournament, etc. We have to be very, very careful about that going forward. Yeah, I think Anna, again, in agreement with us, that there are groups out there saying that they are doing sport for development, but really we would argue that, and we're going to talk a little bit further about this, the difference between sport for development, sport plus development. And this is something where you guys who are doing so fantastically well on the ground, we all have to be very, very careful on what we do. So yeah, the first thing that we have to do is to tell our story better. It's a constant discussion point at coaches across continents, because we often, it's not telling our story so much, it's telling the successes that you guys are having on the field. One of our things is we don't actually have one coach across continents program anywhere in the world. It's your programs, and we're just a tool that is available to you to help you as you design it and run it better. But we're constantly telling the stories about the amazing initiatives that you're doing and the impacts that you're having. But collectively, I do think that the future of sport for social impact is we do need to continue to tell our story better. So what sort of things, looking at that, what sort of things should we be saying, and perhaps what sort of things have we been saying? So what might be some of the changes that collectively that we can do together? I'm fortunate enough to know almost all of you who are part of the program today, and so I know your programs. But if you would start again, how would you be telling your story of what sport's doing in your community any differently to what you've been doing yesterday and in the past? Yeah, fantastic point. If you can all see Judith Gates, everybody, that's my mum, who is a huge, huge part of Coach Across Continents and our development of our programs. Yeah, Brian joining in, talking about the storytelling being about, much more the focus on community change and not on the win-loss tournament participation, etc. I don't know if all of you have seen our annual review that Brian worked on. We took a lot of the sport part of it out to show the community impact piece in a much greater level, again, through the stories of our partnerships. And that has seemed to be quite successful out there as we're talking with different organizations to promote it. Yeah, love the 2 points from Peggy and from Nicole. That those are the types of things that are the positives. That the leagues, because the leagues are linked to the schools, you can see attendance is changing. Now that's much better, we think, in terms of telling the story than saying that one team is top of the league and one team is middle of the league or they've scored goals. That the impact of your program is school attendance. That's fantastic. Yeah, if everyone has a look at Women Win, they're absolutely outstanding at getting voices from local communities to be the voice for sport for social development and the voice for change. And I think that's a hugely, hugely powerful tool, is to have as much voice. We ran a campaign about working with CAC, with you guys, the organization, saying what were some of the great things about the partnerships. And we see some fantastic stuff there, but it's telling the stories from the voices of the participants and the young leaders, and taking away the impact of the games, the tournaments, etc. For us, those are just something you do in order to have your community impact, community development. Okay, Adam. I know last week that Brian, or last month, Brian talked about the monitoring and evaluation and the factual information that we should all be gathering to do a collective voice. And this is, again, something that we try very, very hard with. We have our monitoring and evaluation person, Sophie, put together an impact piece, or we're constantly feeding in things that is happening out on the field, that the impact from using sport for social development. Yeah, Anna's got a good point in saying that it might be interesting to show, and I know some groups have done very well at this, that being involved in the program has certain impacts that people who are not involved in the program don't have. So that's a very positive thing that shows that the sport involvement is really having community impact and change. The last point on this is, and this is hopefully where CAC can do better in gathering this information, that become a collective voice. That if we're all individually telling the stories, that's great, and it obviously has worked to get sport for development to this point. But as we start moving towards wanting sport for development as being a non-fringe development tool, I think our collective voice is going to be the powerful voice. And so we're constantly gathering information from you guys, and hopefully using these virtual learning webinars to share these successes, so that we can all tell stories not just about our own organization, but as you're talking with funders, governments, etc., policymakers, you can say, well, our work's done this, and further work is being done in all these areas to again prove the concept that sport is a huge, huge development tool, as opposed to a game of that has points and goals, etc. So Judy's asked the question, how do we see CAC providing a better collective voice, telling the story better? Well, from that side of things, we're constantly faced with being asked to speak in events, being asked to speak with governments. It has something that's grown considerably for us. And when we go there, we're telling the collective story, not of what CAC is doing, but we're telling the collective story of what's happening out in the fields with the people who are doing the work. Our annual reviews are telling stories about the partners who are doing the work in that way. And we now are at the level where we are working with governments on policies at the top level, and also working with organizations to develop their own local community policies, and using these stories, these collective stories, to sort of put down any arguments that say sport can't achieve those things. But we'd love to know how to do it better. We are working on areas, excuse me, of collective Facebook areas to gather information. More and more information is our aim. Our wiser monitoring evaluation, we're collecting all that data. We're looking at trends from all the work that's going out there at the moment, and hopefully we're able to tell stories a bit better from there. But Judy, I'd love to understand if you've got any ideas on what you think collectively we can all do together. You know, as Brian said, one of the reasons we went into the virtual learning community was so people could share these sorts of stories. Us just leading a conversation, but you guys inputting on your successes so that everybody is understanding. I think sometimes the groups that we work with around the world feel isolated, that they're not getting the information from everybody else. So I think that's a great starting point. All right, so coming into this collective storytelling, and it's something that's certainly personal to me, is the difference between sport for development and sport plus development. This is another opportunity for you guys to, you must have seen the different things out there that we would say sport for development is one thing and sport plus development is another thing. We're certainly very pro one of those things. But what do you think the difference is between sport for development and sport plus development? We think this is one of the key areas that we all have to improve upon if we want to become a major player in this development field. So the difference between sport for development as opposed to sport plus development. Yeah, I love that. Development is kept in mind before designing the games as sport for development. Sport plus development could be potentially could be a negative thing for our field. Yeah, Anna, the sport plus development, we think it's almost two separate things. They're not working together. One is used for the other. Yeah, Shirang saying sport plus development disconnected. That we would certainly talk about that. Yeah, thanks, Nicole. And again, not just us, that our 3-year partnership of educate, adapt, and create. Certainly, we see years 2 and year 3 fantastic community programs who are working so hard and being able to develop their own curricula that is putting it all onto the field as opposed to separating it from a game into a classroom activity. Yeah, all fantastic. And again, this is something very personal to me, that I'm worried about the sport plus development. I don't get it, is the easiest way for me to explain it. I don't understand if they're using sport in a way to do the development thing. I don't know why they don't use sport for all of it. So Adam, I just quick, as we're running out of time. Sorry, there's too many good answers to get. You've actually got me thinking more than I think I'm getting you guys thinking as I'm scribbling to make the notes. So we would say that sport for development sport is the tool that educates. It's all done through the game, the activities, the on-field stuff. So we work very hard at CAC that, hopefully 85-90% of the learning is done with the sport. It's not as Sport Plus Development would do. Sport Plus Development is very much, here's a carrot, here's a tool to bring children into an area. We'll play for a little bit, but then we'll sit them in a classroom, or we'll sit them down and talk, I would argue, talk to them as opposed to talk with them. So I consider it a waste of time to do Sport Plus Development, because I think it wastes the reason why most of the young people are coming is the sport part of it. And if you're reducing their learning time by half by putting them in a classroom, it would be, and I joke that our CAC staff wouldn't be very successful in Sport Plus Development because they love being on the fields and doing the playing and the learning as opposed to going back into the classroom. And that's how we design Coach Across Continents, that everything should be able to be done on the field as opposed to there. But again, I do have concern in the future for sport for development, that Sport Plus Development could cloud the fields for us, that people won't understand that the development is taking place on the field. So we'll quickly read through this because I know we're going ahead of time and everything like that. Why does Sport for Social Impact work? The big thing for us is, our joke is that when you guys bounce a ball in your communities, there might be no one around and we can't see anybody, but you bounce a ball and suddenly there's hundreds of young people swarming into that area. So sport can reach more people than I think anything else can. I know when I first started CAC, we ran a program in Kagoma and we were doing HIV behavior change. The day before, in the medical facility, they'd had 17 people turn up for the HIV discussion. When we did it on the field, we had 149 on the field and about 700 people surrounding the field listening to what was going on. And the message was very similar. The difference was that we had sport. So I think that's always one of my inspirational things personally when I'm tired out on the fields, knowing that that's what sport can do. We think that sport can cut across cultures, nations, borders, barriers more than anything else out there. And it done correctly, it can bring people together, communities together. We're very conscious, and we tell all our partner groups that we're not trying to work with just the elite athletes, that anybody should be able to play sports and be part of sport for development. You can provide problem-solving situations where different solutions can be discussed. We would call it through our self-directed learning and your self-directed learning programs. And these things can and do lead to social change. It can create safe spaces. We talk about safe spaces being such a key part to the long-term success of sport for social development, that if we can create a space where, as the young people step across onto the field or the court or whatever we're using, it's a safe space for them to start talking about things that are real to them. Almost impossible, I think, to do it in a classroom. The things that we want to talk about is very, very difficult to generate that conversation. But through sport, I was just in Zanzibar working in an area, 99% Muslim, and we were talking about women's rights, and we created this safe space where the discussion could flow that I don't think could have happened anywhere else in those communities. And we're now at the stage where the government have asked us to introduce the program into all of their schools. Again, I don't think anything other than sport could have done that. And para sport can be used for positive community development. These are the things that we're trying to get across now. We're looking at the future of sport for social impact, that the para sport can be used for community development, community responsibility, etc. And with that, this is one of Brian, our chief exec's, most important things, that sport isn't inherently good. We've got to be very, very careful when we say about doing sport for social impact. They already assume that everything's good: teamwork, communication, sportsmanship, etc., etc. What we would say is the sport's not inherently good. It's how you guys are using the sport that makes it good. We would say many, many examples of bad things are coming out of sport right now. In fact, every organization, FIFA, IOC, ICC, all of those groups are facing huge problems because of drugs, bribery, misuse of funds, etc., etc. So we've got to be very, very careful that people understand that it's the sport done correctly that's the key. It's not just the sport. And sport is used to determine, sorry, we'll go back to that. Sorry, Adam, keep going. We can just go on from there. The point in blue there was that it's not about winning. That's what we've got to be very clear about when we go forward, is we're not creating cultures where our sport for development, the sport part is used for winning. We're using sport as this thing that can create community impact and community change. And how we do that is how we tell the story. And that will be, I think, the ultimate success. I do think there's going to be a couple of years going forward where we're going to have some huge challenges as a field. I think that if we just assume that just because we're doing good things and we know it's good, everyone else is going to get to that level, I think we're going to have some problems. And again, I do think there may be some issues going forward of explaining sport for development as opposed to sport plus development. So we put some solutions down here. And again, I would love you guys to put down from what you think some of these solutions are. The first one that we've been very conscious about for the last 18 months, and we've worked with a lovely branding organization called the Taji Group, and they've been very careful with us on how we tell a story. But what we think is we must show everyone's story that we're development programs, we're not sports initiatives. And I don't know, I'm not certain how we all do that just at the moment, but I am convinced, and our guys are convinced, that that's how we have to tell the story, and that's what we're going to do from CAC's point of view, as opposed to, and almost unfortunately using the sport as a behind the scenes example of what we're doing, but not making it front and center. It's periphery. It's involved in everything that we do, but we're not making sport the front and center piece. And I don't know whether that's correct or not. So I'd be interested to know whether what you guys think about how we tell this story. One of the things we looked upon is, instead of saying sport for social impact, do we say social impact using sport? Something as simple as that, to retell the branding story so people can understand it more. If we have sport first, do they assume, which we've already discussed, that it's a game of scoring goals, scoring points, etc.? If we use social impact or social development first, will that capture the attention in a different way? Yeah, really interesting thing. Yeah, again, all you guys are inspirational to us, and we learn from what you're saying. Maybe having that change of wording could be important. Highlighting the pathways. I know, Nicole, it's something that you guys are great at it, and we're getting better at it, showing pathways, that what happens when people come into all these programs around the world, their pathways towards success. It's fun for us because all of you have different goals when you're involved in the sport for social development piece, so all the pathways are different as we see them. So it's very, very exciting. I think that's why our SDL educators love traveling around the world, because each of the programs give them great learning opportunities and different challenges. So yeah, that might be something of how we've all got to be very consistent that the front part of the story is always a development part of it, not the sports part of it. The second point on the solution, we all have to do better, and it's an ongoing thing at CAC, and I know you're all working very hard on this, is using the monitor evaluation to show community development and impact. We've all got to do better at this. We're getting asked for it. And I would argue, and I know Nicole has said this earlier on, that there is a lot of data out there at the moment. We just have to use it better. We have to ask each other questions. If there's something coming up, we're obviously available. If one of you guys are working on something that can benefit your program, a potential corporate partner or something like that, please feel free to ask us questions about, and we can perhaps give you some other examples and some monitoring evaluation that may help you tell the story in a way that's better for you. But the monitoring evaluation, it's a real challenge, and it's very difficult. I think sport for social development is much more difficult than monitoring evaluation that says they built a school, or they've given out a malaria net, or they built a well, or something like that. That's quite easy to report that, because once you've built the well, there's the proof that you've built the well. The sport for development has so many more difficulties in telling the story, because there's so many outcomes are coming from your great work. The third one is the academic groups. We get asked, it seems like every couple of weeks, an academic group is getting in touch with us to try and do an academic paper. There's certainly some pitfalls to that if they don't understand quite what sport for social development is, it's a lot of work for us. So what we've agreed to do is one per year that we work with an academic institute, and we just actually had one of our papers published, which was very, very exciting for us. And you guys feel free if you need something that from there are some stuff out there now that can be used to support the work that you're doing. Yeah, love that from Judy from Play Soccer. Really presenting the program in a way that has so many different impacts, not concentrating on the sport piece, but showing that the program is having impacts on health, and the economic impacts. And it'll always feed back. I think one of the things with photos that you're all using is showing sport, so we don't have to highlight the sport piece. It's already there. Yeah, Elvis from DRC, fantastic stuff. Yeah, the types of stories we've got to do from there. And this storytelling side of things, it's not telling the story in a once upon a time make-believe way. It's actually just telling the great work that you're all doing. And how do we present that to, I think, unfortunately, we often get trapped into looking at it from the funding side of things. We're much more concerned on getting policies in place, or getting communities working in a way that are doing these child rights, women's rights, conflict prevention, etc., and then telling the stories of success. And also, I think, telling the stories of the challenges faced by it. But we know what great work you're all doing, so I think collectively we do have to tell the stories better. Sorry, I think we're running a bit out of time for you guys. I appreciate you all being on there. I'll quickly go through a couple of slides here. So why do we need to tell our stories better? We use a lot of our storytelling to improve our own CAC delivery. I think that we use most of our monitor evaluation, as Brian said last month, is to try and do our work a lot better. The second one is to create the awareness of success for sport for social impact. Again, I don't think you guys are getting enough credit. The people in the field, I don't think are getting enough credit for the work that you're doing. And that comes down to our collective voice. We do have to legitimize the field. And that's all of us working together when we're talking with local education groups, when we're talking with governments, when we're talking with larger NGOs. We've got to keep pushing that sport is having the greatest impact. And again, I'm passionate in the sense that I think sport can have the greatest development impact out of anything out there, because it can gather more people, collect the imagination can come together, and solutions can be found. And then the last one, which is important to everybody, is it will lead to greater funding opportunities if we tell the stories better. This is something from particularly Brian and Adam, is that the collective voice is going to be very, very important. We're very, very fortunate because we work with more than 100 implementing partners around the world in 30 plus countries, that we're bringing together that voice from our side of things, that we understand what's going on. But together we should be sharing information with each other so that the voice is one voice talking. So there's a consistency going around the world in what sport can do. And it has to be a clear voice. It's not just focusing on the results. It's how you're telling this clear voice in the way of this impact that you're having in your community. So our work going forward that we've discussed, we just had everyone together in January in Orlando. We had our full global staff together. That one of the things that we decided we want to be involved in is influencing policies. And we chose a slightly different route, that we're not as interested in creating policies at the top end of governments, because our research with Hogan Lovells has shown that there are many policies that are existing. They're just not making it down into the community level, particularly on child rights and women's rights. So we're working very, very hard to create policies from the bottom up, and this falls into line with our theory of change, that we want to gather the data and the information from below, and that makes it much, much easier when you're working with governments that we have a proof of concept. I think it's quite easy from the top down that governments say they have a policy for women's rights and child rights. We're just not seeing it everywhere. And again, we're in so many countries now, and we're always surprised, knowing what policies exist in that country, that communities are not aware of it. So I think this collective voice, the outcome will be that community policies, local policies, even policies within your own organizations are very clear, and they will have a bigger impact going forward. And then the last part on this is that each individual action, etc., will create community responsibility. We're very big into this community responsibility side of things, creating through sport that communities have responsibility for their young people. It's not just a responsibility of the schools, it's not just a responsibility of parents, etc. It becomes a community responsibility for change. Our big thing that we had in January was this phrase, education for a changing world. That's what we want to use sport for. We're almost moving to the point where it's not just to address one issue each time, it's to address and create education that can help solve problems in the future. And we were very surprised Obama took this on in his State of the Union address a couple of months after we talked about it. And obviously he wasn't bugging our room at the time to hear what we're talking about. But I think sport can be very, very powerful, that can provide education for a changing world, not for yesterday's problems, not even for today's problems, but if we do it correctly, young people, by using sport for social development, can perhaps solve problems that they're going to be having in the future. And the last one on this, the last sentence, is the creating education outside of the classroom. This might be a way forward for, as we're telling the story, is that if people don't get that that sport is anything other than just a fun activity, that perhaps as we're talking about it, we say, no, what sport is it's education outside the classroom. And as we're looking at some of the sustainable goals, particularly the women's sustainable goals of secondary education, one of the things that we would argue is, we have to create an education platform where young women can get education, not just in the classroom of the ABCs, but outside the classroom, which would be religious, cultural, traditional, etc., and they can find solutions to their problems. Okay, and again, I'm so sorry. Actually, when we started this presentation, we thought it was going to be about 20 minutes, but it's just because I think I'm reading all of these comments down by the side. But if you guys have any questions, I'm going to hang out for another 5 minutes or 10 minutes or so. If there's anything that we can answer, or Brian and Adam are all on the call, please feel free to ask. What can CAC do to help? What types of questions and challenges perhaps going forward? Do you agree with the challenges that we've got going forward for the future of sport for social impact? Do we think it's going to be successful? What types of things collectively can we do together? So any ideas that you may have, and again, I know we've overrun an hour, but it's cold and rainy in Boston right now, so I'm not going anywhere, so please feel free to ask. Brian's talked about, keep sending us your successes. We have quite a big social media platform right now, so send us your successes and we can keep promoting those. Great, David, we'll talk directly with you about developing your own M&E. We'd also, Brian will connect you to last month's webinar that talked about monitoring evaluation, and but we can go a lot deeper with you at designing what you think will be most successful for your organization on the M&E. I know the fantastic work you're doing, and you guys being CICs as well. So that would be great. We'll happily work. And if anyone else out there would like to work with David and share their ideas on what they're doing from M&E, that would be great too. Fantastic. Well, if there's nothing else coming through from Nicole, Yeah, I mean, we obviously, we have a great relationship with you guys, and I totally agree. I think that the more we can share information, the more this collective voice can come into play. We can all be successful. We're often doing things where we look at something from our corporate side of things and say it doesn't fit the CAC model, but certainly we can pass this on to other groups, and we've worked very, very hard over the last 18 months of doing it from there. Peggy, thank you very much. I think I have meetings on Wednesday morning, but then Wednesday evening I start my 25th celebrations. So this is why I think Brian wanted me to do this talk this morning as opposed to in a couple of days' time when I may have been having a great time with my friends. Great. Well, absolutely fantastic. What we do from here is that we'll look at a lot of these comments as well, and that helps us improve on what we're doing. So we will take this information and share a lot more going forward. Just quickly going through, if Adam, if you just flick through on the next page, the next VLC in June, it's building up on this, is how to tell your story. You guys, I'm constantly in awe. I've just run a program with Michael Johnson, who was a former, well, four-time Olympic gold medalist, and we worked with him in Dallas. And at the end of the week, there was tears in his eyes as he was saying thank you to the participants that were from around the world. And what I said to Michael was, this is my everyday. I get inspired by the people who are out there who are doing this amazing work and sharing all of these things. So you continue to inspire me. So thank you very much for coming on this morning. And June we'll be sending information out about the June webinar. Have a think about how we can help in any way that we can help. We're very much working towards becoming even better with our year-round support to everybody. So have a think about what we can do. That's fantastic. Thank you. Appreciate everybody.